Well, everybody, back in 2020, I wrote an article for Inside Pitch magazine. It was called Baseball University for the Love of Podcasts and Clinic Video. And in that article, I made mention of Peter Caliendo and his Baseball Outside the Box podcast. Well, once I did that and Peter read it, maybe about a week or so later, I got an email from him. And I always talk about relationships on this show, and this relationship was built back from that email, and it's been getting stronger and stronger ever since then. So let me give you a little bit of an idea about Peter. Peter is a former USA Baseball national team coach. He is the president of Caliendo Sports International. He's also the vice president of ISG Baseball, which is the Internet International Sports Group. He is director of Baseball for Good International. He is a recipient of the ABCA Meritorious Award. He's in the Illinois High School Coaches. He's in the Illinois High School Coaches Hall of Fame, and he's been doing this for 43 years. Welcome to the show, Peter. It's good to see you again.
Good, Jimmy. How are you, buddy? Hey, you had to mention the 43 years just as a reminder of my age, huh?
Yeah, I
Good to
I
be
guess
on, man. Love it. Love your
I
show.
believe me, I love having you. I mean, this is a pleasure for me. We just saw each other a week ago at the convention, and I'm always happy to see you. And obviously, I always want to talk baseball.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how baseball brings people together, but how, like you said, how we both met and we stay in touch and we got relationships. I wish we lived closer. That'd be great, get together with some coffee and talk baseball. But, since we got the technology, here's the next best way, right?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, this is great. I mean, ever since, the pandemic and, we've gotten into these Zoom meetings more and more, it makes it easier. I mean, I like to see the person's face when I'm talking to them. It just makes it easier to talk. And yeah, this is great. So, Pete,
Absolutely.
let's jump into because again, with you, the thing that always amazes me about you is that you really understand the issues that youth coaches have and the importance of educating coaches. So let's jump into that a little bit. Give us a little bit of your idea on what we should do to educate coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And and people that are listening, think about it. We're all always trying to learn and get better, and it makes the game better in general. It makes it grow more as we get better coaches. My benefit is obviously what you mentioned, the 43 years in the game, right? I mean, when you're in that long, you've got a lot of experience. Being in 54 countries, seeing baseball around the world, gives me a broader perspective. That doesn't mean I know it all. I don't, we don't know. I don't know a lot of it, but it gives me broader perspective. And for years, I've been working with youth programs in the US and around the world. And, probably done about 500 coaching programs for volunteer coaches, developed a set of DVDs that I sold all over the world, all specifically to help volunteer. Why? Because that's the foundation of our sport, right? And we need, in order to grow the sport, and we tell countries all over the world, we want to make sure they focus on this because you're not going to grow it unless you develop very good coaches, and I'm sure we can talk about that. So it's important that our grassroots has the best coaches, really good ones, and a lot of them are volunteers. So it's up to us to help them because we're doing this full time, and they're not. They got jobs full time. Put yourself in their shoes. That's not easy. Now, it's not an excuse, but it is a little tougher to work all day and then go work with young kids. And God bless them, and thank God we have them. It just if we can support them more, that just helps the game more. So that's I think that's my thinking. It's been my thinking for 40 some years, and that's the reason I developed, the programs, the DVDs, to help volunteer coaches.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, it is difficult. But let's face it, in this day and age, it's been it's become a little bit easier for those volunteer coaches to get at least some information. Whereas, when you and I first started coaching, we were shooting from the hip or just, we needed mentors.
Absolutely. And you know what? And speaking about that, well, you hit a good point because there's a lot of technology out there. You have to be careful because you got to, kind of filter through it. Maybe do some, research and development where you try some things, and then see how it works with your kids and or maybe ask somebody. But volunteer coaches, if you want to do something really good, if you have the ability, and just, try it. If you have the ability of having somebody like Jimmy or somebody that you look up to that knows that, the game pretty good, or somebody in your league, that has been in the game a long time, have them come out to your practice, have them come out to your game. Maybe it's a local game, so you all live there. Have them help you by sitting in the stands and just watching what you do and take some notes. And then afterwards, maybe the next day, coffee or next evening, talk about it because it's constructive criticism. It's tough to take. I do it, and I know ABC Hall of Fame coaches that have done it. But you're going to be better for it because you're going to get some reality of some things that you can actually improve on. And I think that's one really good way to get better as a coach.
Yeah, and I love what you said about constructive criticism. Very, very important. At least I believe it is. I know me, I want, even with this show, I talk to people all the time and I say, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me what you
Hmm.
don't like. I want to hear that because then I can get better. So what you said, that I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, I agree with you. And but it's a tough one, right? Because you never want to hear what you're doing bad. We're all doing things bad. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I know I've got a pretty good idea what I do bad, but there's a lot of things you don't know. You don't realize it. A lot of it has to do with even with kids, simple little things like when you're talking to kids, are you standing straight up and they're kneeling down, or are you even with them at the same level? That's a small little thing. How long are you talking to them? You talk to them for a minute, minute and a half, or you talking for 5 minutes? Your voice tone, right? You may think your voice, and even me, I'm talking to you right now, my voice tone may not be the best, and people may misinterpret what I'm saying depending on my voice. Are you wearing sunglasses while you're talking to them? They can't see your eyes. There's a lot of little things that can really help. How positive are you? Because the being positive with people in general, and I need that work because I'm not a positive person. But when I get on the field, I'm very positive. I change that mentality. But as an individual, I'm Italian, so and you're Italian, I tend to be a little bit more negative, right? Like the world's falling apart. But as a coach, or the other thing is, what kind of language are you using? Never use bad language with young kids, right? That's a bad example. So there's a lot of little things that coaches can improve on that will really help them. And lastly, Jimmy, we talked about the positive. Isn't it amazing when you tell a young person, hey, tap them on the shoulder, say, hey, pretty good job, or don't worry about it for now, or just anything, just talking to them. It just raises the level of their confidence that they can do something because coach believes in them. Yes, you've got to be disciplined. Yes, you got to be organized still. But boy, just giving them a little bit of confidence, I see it all the time. It just helps 100%.
Yeah, and I'll say especially when, when they're dealing with a little adversity, when something didn't go right, okay? So, whatever, a kid makes an error, he strikes out in a key situation, whatever it is, okay? You and I know that that's part of the game. That's going to happen, okay? But maybe the kid never had a coach that did build him up. And I've seen it a million times when I go over and pat him on the back and say, hey, give me a smile. Come on, get back out there. Don't worry about it. They're like looking like, coach, you're not mad? And I'm like, no, I'm not mad. Let's go to work. So being positive is so, so important.
Yeah, and it's not just for coaches. I know you have a lot of parents around the call. That's tough for parents, right? I mean, I'm a stepfather, so it was a little easier for me as far as saying things. But when it's your own kid, it's a little tough, And a young person makes I don't know, makes an error, like you said, or strikes out. Who do you think they're looking at first? They're looking at their parents in the stands, you know? I mean, if you've got a negative attitude in the stands, that's not going to help the situation. No different with coaches, like you said. I think everybody needs to understand that, baseball, I know we don't like to use this term, and Ken Rivers, God bless him, I know he kind of reversed it, but baseball is a negative game in some ways, because you have a lot of failure compared to most sports. It does teach a lot because of the failures, but it also has a lot of negativity, and that's why I think we have to reverse it and be as positive as possible.
Yeah, I agree with you. And also, now that you touched on the parents, I'll get into that a little bit, is I believe that parents view the youth game through the same lens that they view the professional game. And I don't think that they understand that everybody on that field, coaches, umpires, players, everybody is learning. It's all developmental. There's no reason to get upset. That win in the game that you're watching, of course you want your kids' team to win, but in the grand scheme of things, that win means nothing. So you can't watch the game through the lens of a professional baseball game.
Oh, absolutely. And then when you throw that, throw in the pitching, because, a lot of times, it's a very simple question. If Major League Baseball doesn't pitch a kid or a player, pitcher 3 days in a row, why are we pitching them three? Even if they threw 10 pitches each time, they still had to throw a lot in the bullpen or warming up. That's stress on the arm. So yeah, we can't always follow what Major League Baseball does. And on top of that, think about this. The things I know you're very positive as a high school coach and you work on this, things like bunting, we don't want to do it anymore because they don't do it at the higher levels. But, why? Because some colleges still bunt, and then now you're seeing it more and more in the big leagues. So teach all the skills, make the player better individually, and then that player will later on, the coaches can decide what they want to use them for. But I know this, I'll give you an example. I couldn't run, couldn't hit, couldn't feel much. I mean, wasn't a very good player. Fundamentally, I was good because I looked good. Um, but at the same time, why did I play college baseball? Because I could play all positions, right? Because I could bunt, I could do certain things. I may not have the speed, I may not have the power, I may not have all the things, but I had a lot of them. So if somebody got hurt, I got to play another position all the time. So if you teach them all the skills, then they've got a better chance of long-term development, which is playing the game longer, and not only playing it longer, but also being able to enjoy it a little bit more, have some fun at it, and it just makes the process much better. So that's why I love your show because I think it teaches a lot of that, and it keeps reinforcing it to coaches, parents, and like you said, umpires and everybody else, league officials who are at the top who should be, hopefully laying all that out because it starts at the top and filters all the way down to everybody.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you 100%. But something that you said, about playing, all of the positions, and you know how I am about that. I agree with you 100% at the youth levels. Play them everywhere. In your opinion, when do you think that you should start pigeonholing kids into certain positions? And it doesn't only have to be one; it could be two, let's say, or whatever.
Right, because you've got major league players. I mean, I look at the 2016 Cubs, those guys had, I'm a Chicago guy and they had five, six, seven players with Joe Madden that played multiple positions, great athletes. And I'm going to use the reference of Japanese players. Take the Japanese players. I remember major league people saying, well, we got to take a shortstop, move him a second. It's going to take most of spring training to do that. It's a long process. You look at the Japanese, they can move a guy that same day. Why? Because fundamentally, they can feel, catch, and throw with the best of them. So all you have to do is tweak and teach a few things for that position. I remember Japanese second shortstops moving to second base in the big leagues faster than any of our guys, and that later on happened, with the Cubs because Madden had that type of mentality. To answer your question, I'm not sure exactly when they're going to change, but I know this. I've had players that were second basemen, when they were younger, and they're catchers in the big leagues. I knew catchers in a bit when they were younger, even first round draft picks that were catchers, and now were outfielders in the big leagues. You don't know when you're going to change, but assume that as you get closer to high school, right? You're probably going to start identifying, right, what your strength is, because now it's going to get a little bit more competitive. You got to make a choice of who you're going to cut and all that. So you want to kind of figure out what your best position is, but maintain your fundamental skills to the best level. Because what's going to happen is when you get to that cut level, this, we're going to make a decision. If that's the same hitter, everybody, those players are the same hitters are all hit well. I'm going to pick the guy, obviously, defensively now that's better. So make it tough for the coach. Try to be as best you can as a rounded player, and then you got a better chance of making that team.
Yeah, because let's face it, I mean, the higher level college programs will say, okay, I would venture to say that that most of the players that they recruit typically shortstops from the high school ranks. Okay. And then they get them and because they know that they're athletes. Okay. So once they know that they're an athlete, well, yeah, like you said, then we can move them to the outfield. We can move them to first, but we can move wherever we want because they'll adapt.
Absolutely. And you and I remember this. I know your audience may not, maybe younger. We're about the same age, but the same hair, everything. We've got Itchy Jones used to recruit, yeah, at the University or Southern Illinois, all shortstops, as many as he could, right? But he told them, you're going to be playing different positions again because athletically you're better. Most of the time as a shortstop, but at the same time, a lot of those shortstop pitched also, and you never know when you need that, in your arsenal. It may not be all the time, but you've got, the better athletes you have, obviously you're going to be in a little bit better position. And don't forget, and I know this isn't a topic, but if you have the ability to find players, athletes are good, fundamentals are good, but character has to be at the top of that list.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, to me, that's number one. And again, we both know if you're a high school player, and you're going on to play college, the first thing the college coach is going to ask is number one, what is his grades, and number two, what kind of kid is he? Before you even talk about baseball.
Exactly. Yeah, and people probably wonder, well, okay, they know education is important, but why for baseball? Well, because that's probably why I wasn't very good. That is your attention span, your ability to focus, concentrate on one thing, get your studies done, get them on time, get your grades in the right position. Because what's going to happen? We know baseball. You're in the outfield, right field, or maybe you just got put in. Guess where the next ball is probably going to be hit? It's going to be hit to you because you probably won't concentrate. It always comes to you when you're not concentrating. If you can't focus for 9 innings, out in the outfield or infield, that ball's going to be hit to you that one time that you're not concentrating. Well, that goes to show because if you're not concentrating in your classroom, you're probably not getting pretty good grades. So that, people should understand that. I know parents do, but I think it's more important for young kids to understand that. I always tell young kids, I'm going to make a choice. I'm going to go with the young person that, got very good grades for that simple reason and because they can think on their own a little bit more because they've had to do it in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. But you had mentioned little earlier about Japanese players. So you do a tremendous amount of work internationally with baseball, with coaching and all of this stuff. Talk to us a little bit about what you see in other countries versus what you see in the United States.
Well, the main thing I see the top thing is the passion for the game. Now, I'm not saying we don't have passion for the game. We got a lot of young kids that love baseball in the U.S., but the hunger, the passion, the love for the game, the commitment to the game. I think we're losing that a little bit in the U.S. I think that players have so many different options now to whatever they can do, or sometimes they find the easy way out. Right? Well, baseball's too hard. I'm failing. I'm going to go play soccer or some other sport. Nothing against the other sports, but the failure level is not as high in those sports than it is in baseball. So I think the number one thing is definitely the passion for the game. And obviously, a lot of them want to play in the U.S. And then the other part is the creativity of the coaches. Now, high school coaches have it. I know some college coaches, and I say because of facilities, high school coaches are, coaching indoors in the winter, small places, they got to be creative, right? College coaches that have a little bit better facilities or they may be in warmer climates. They don't have to be as creative. Let's put it that way. But the creativity worldwide is incredible because they've got to think of ways to make themselves better. They're learning from us and they're learning from other countries like Canada, Australia, and some other good baseball countries. But at the same time, they've got to figure out, how do we make this particular player better and how do we grow the game in that country? That's the difference. Here in the US, but I don't know, you have to think about how to grow the game because, there's a lot of competition. And the average audience in Major League Baseball is getting older. But at the same time, we've got 26 million amateur players, so you're going to have some successful ones and good ones.
Yeah, I mean, it always interests me because again, I know you do this, and I know that you had, I don't remember if it was the last time you were on the show or just in a general conversation that you and I had, but A lot of other countries mandate coaches' education, and we don't do that here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Before we just got on, I was working on my talk at the Massachusetts High School Coach Association Clinic. It's coming up in January 24th, 25th. If any of you, audience is near there, come to the clinic because I will be there. They got some great lineup of speakers. But I was working on that because, the question was going to be, you know, uh, which countries per capita have the most major league players. Most people are not going to guess that at all. And the number one country per capita is Curacao, the island of Curacao. They have more major league players per capita. You got some other ones, obviously, that are pretty big at the same time. But the common denominator between the small countries, when I say small population wise, and number of players, which, I can give you those. I won't give you the numbers right now, but Cuba, Australia, Canada, Netherlands, and Curacao. I'll give you those five for right now. Some of the smallest countries population-wise, also as far as players playing the game. They have one common denominator that is the reason that obviously they have successful programs. And they all compete at the international level with the best in the world. So you can say US, Dominican, Venezuela, it doesn't matter, Japan, they compete with all of them, right? And the common denominator is coaches' education. That's bottom line. Mandated by a lot of those countries, mandated by their government. Because it's like anything else. If in the US, if I'm going to send my 10-year-old to be on a team and we're practicing all year round and playing all year round, which we're doing a lot nowadays, what's the difference between that and going to school? I've got a person that's educated. Well, I better educate the person that's going to have my 10-year-old or 12-year-old, in practice and games all the time, and they influence that young person. I want to see somebody that's got some background in education a little bit. So that's what I would say is the common denominator worldwide and why those countries are very successful competitively against some big countries.
So that's interesting. So, again, just for the sake of conversation, let's say next week our government mandates that if you're working with kids, from whenever it starts, age 5 up to um, high school seniors, that you need to have this to be able to coach. What do you think would happen in this country?
It's interesting you bring that up. First of all, it's very difficult because the governing body of sport, USA Baseball, has their hands tied a little bit. They've got a program, they've got a very good program where coaches can go online and learn and all that. But the problem is, all the other national organizations came before them and they've got programs, they're doing their own thing. It's kind of like, it's a little bit like the Wild West here, right? You got to do your own thing. And we've got the numbers, so things are good and all that. And, you get major league players and we're all happy. And I worked with 500 youth leagues in the US, for over the years. And one of the things that I told the leagues all the time was, listen, try this because leagues have tried it and been successful with it. So look at what's worked. Mandate your coaches to have some kind of training. It could be a weekend training. It could be with now you've got follow-up online training you can do, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? The first thing they said, we're going to lose all our coaches. I go, really? Why don't you
Yeah.
check it out? Try it. I had a couple of friends of mine who actually then, tried it. They were very successful. The coaches that drop out are normally the ones you don't want, okay? Because they think they know it all. Then all of a sudden you've got an educational program, even a small one or something. Like if I wanted to coach basketball, I have no idea about basketball. I got a pretty good idea how to handle kids. But if you show me a few skills and a few drills and stations and this and that, I can then start to coach basketball. So what happened is they started getting new people. This was when we didn't have the internet, the ability to do online training. Because the next thing, if you're going to do it really well, okay, you've got the education that they come to the clinic and they work with the coaches, and I mean work with them. That means they do the drills. It's fun. It's entertaining. They're getting better and they understand what it feels like to throw. Once they do that, then obviously you want to give them a little test. The test is always good, right? Because it keeps them thinking, hey, I better pay attention. The other good thing is sometimes you need to send people to their practices. Now, I understand that all cannot be done, but if you're asking me the best way to do it, you've got to send people to their practices and evaluate them there. Now they've got, they know that somebody's watching, all right? And And then that's important because they can get better that way. So what would happen, to answer your question, is yes, people would say, oh, I'm not going to do it, but you'd actually see a lot of people do it. And then when they go to the clinic, if you have the right coaches handling the clinic, boy, you got them. Because now it's just like kids. If you want to keep kids in the game, you have good coaches. So once they get to practice, if you got good coaches, you're going to keep them long term. If you have a coaching clinic and it's really good and it's talking baseball, how could you not want to go talk baseball? You might have to do 2 or 3 of these because people travel and they're busy. And then on top of it, you do some follow-ups online where they can jump online from home and learn, maybe talk about what their issues are and help them in that manner. So there's ways to do it. Leagues could actually do it themselves if they put the time into it instead of spending money on trophies and worry about, best uniforms and all this other stuff. How about coaches' education? Have some fun with the coaches and get them being better. So that's what I would do, but that's what would also happen possibly if you mandated it, and I've seen it happen and been successful.
Yeah, because I think it's important. And, at the ABCA Youth Summit, we talk about that a lot, about how we can do this. And, to your point, USA Baseball, it's fantastic what they have out there. But, unless you use it, it's not going to do anybody any good.
And you got to hold coaches accountable too, right? I mean, if they're going to go through a program, what did they learn? Are they applying it? How are they applying it? So that's why there's some follow up there. Education is great, Jimmy. You and I know that. I mean, but that's just step one, right? Now you got to learn how to apply that education, and then step, 3 after you apply it, is it successful? The players enjoying it? Are they getting better? So there's a lot to it. And I think, if we're trying to do it from a broad perspective, when you got a country like, say, the Netherlands, which was a small country, they're one of the top educational countries when it comes to baseball. They got a great educational program for coaches. That's the reason they've been very successful. And they're very small, but they're in a small area. So we almost have to think of it that way. Instead of having a governing body trying to control it all, have individual communities or organizations, and it could be Pony does theirs, Little League does theirs. I get it, that's all educational, but I'm talking about more at a smaller scale within the community. And I think you can grow that in that community a lot better than you can if you're trying to do a standardized one.
Yeah, that's something that I've often thought about doing in my local community, is to try and go to these little leagues and youth baseball programs, and tell them, hey guys, look, I'm here to help you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll come and I'll talk to your coaches, I'll talk to your players, I'll talk to your parents. Doesn't have to be, like you said, anything elaborate. It's just talking baseball.
Yep.
And I think I'm a little gun shy because my experience way back when my son was playing was not very good with the league. I mean, I felt that I was always butting heads with people because I felt that I knew, what was right and how to educate coaches and how we should keep parity in the league and how to this winning in a youth community league is not what the goal is. The goal is to teach the kids. And my feeling was that, first of all, nobody there wanted to hear what I had to say. So I'm kind of gun shy because I believe that they're going to come back at me and say, hey, we don't need that. We know what we're doing, and da 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 da.
Oh, and they're going to say that. There's no doubt about it. We had the same thing. And now the benefit we had in the 70s and 80s, I was with a baseball school, Mickey on baseball school, and we had started Baseball Schools USA, which we went away from in the US. I think is a major mistake. Except for the colleges and high school, some high school programs like yours, we don't have instructional camps anymore for young kids, where they can have fun and develop. Because what we did was we hosted in Chicago. I'll give you an idea. We hosted 60 coaching clinics for youth organizations, and that was free to the organization, but obviously the players paid to come. It was very inexpensive. Then mandatory, if we're going to do that for you, mandatory, we have a coaches program on a weekend, maybe a Saturday, half day, full day. Why did we want that educational program for the youth coaches? Because we wanted to get them out. We're hoping, and some of the leagues follow, most of the leagues followed our lead, made it mandatory. They saw the benefit of it. And what happened was, and this is part you love, because they're volunteers, they're going to come to the clinic. You're going to go over all this stuff. And I'll tell you what, even the guys and gals that have been coaching for 30 years are going to walk out of there, and we've had it happen many times. They're going to walk out of there going, oops, I thought I knew a lot. Because it's impossible for them to know what we know. We do it full time every day, right? So we know the ins and outs. We're making mistakes constantly. We're learning from those. So when they saw that, that now changed their mentality, knowing that, hey, you know what, we've got to change this program because, they've just shown us a way better way to do this. And I think, and we didn't have any big names or anything. I mean, nobody knew who I was. But it's a matter of getting in there and showing them. But if you can't get them to the coaching clinic, then that's another story, right? Then that's a league that just doesn't want to get better by having, well, at least like you said, one coaching program. And you could have a coaching program 3 different weekends, and they can pick which one to come to. So if they're traveling, they can't make one. They've got another option. So there's ways to do it, and I get where you're coming from because we had the ones that didn't want to do it or didn't believe in it. We couldn't get it going. But after we, did the 60 of them, it was pretty good. The program worked out pretty good. And guess what happens later? This is the part, and even I forgot this. What happens later is because the leagues with the good programs, parents aren't stupid. They're going, hey, these guys got a coaches program. These guys are educating their kids or their coaches. My kid's getting a little bit better. Or they see that, hey, I'm going to go play in that league because that's a better league because we've got educated people. We don't have people yelling at each other on the field. We don't have people swearing or whatever. They just see that and they're going to want to go there. So it's like anything else. When you build it really well, they will come because they see it's better than your program.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you would alluded to it about, teaching them better ways to do things and better methods and that type of thing. But what do you feel about taking youth coaches? And I'm talking about, guys that are coaching kids as young as 5, 6, 7, 8, and teaching them like you had mentioned before about how long are you talking to the kids? Are you wearing your sunglasses? Do you believe one is more important than the other, or they both have to be done? In other words, are we teaching them more on how to coach, or are we teaching them more X's and O's?
No, well, at the real young levels, we're teaching them the fundamentals, right? We want to make sure that they're strong in their fundamentals because fundamentally, if you're strong, you're going to be a little bit better player, and you've got to build success early, right? You want them to be successful because once they're successful individually, and that could be a kid hitting, striking out and all of a sudden hitting ground balls, right? That's success. That keeps them in the game longer. The other thing is, I think we have to look at this overall and say, league-wise, what are we going to do to make the game more fun and long-term keep them in the game? Here are a couple changes I would make. First of all, I know people are going to jump all over me. I get rid of T-ball, okay? T-ball is a complete mess. I get it that they're having fun in some ways because the parents are all out there and they're holding their hand, running the bases and showing them, or maybe they just one base they run to. I get all that. But the problem is trying to hit a ball off a tee. I've had college players struggle sometimes with a tee. So now you're asking a 5-year-old, 6-year-old with a bat that is too heavy to hit a ball on a tee that's small. I mean, if you had a basketball on there, you'd be a lot more successful, right? Or not a basket, probably a volleyball. But we already did all this in Vancouver, Canada. BC Baseball, one of the best organizations in the world. I was with them 10 years. We did a caravan of like 26 cities, and the caravan had 4 or 5 coaches. I was part of it, and we'd go into a city. Everybody would come out, coaches, players, parents. We set up 4 or 5 stations. All be fun stations. What would be the hitting station? It'd be a big barrel bat. You call it a wiffle bat. Mine's more of a softer bat because it's more legit. With a big barrel, big balls, and we toss the balls underhand. Parents would toss them under, and kids are hitting them all over the place. One-handed, two-handed, who cares, right? As long as they're hitting it. So now why not have a smaller game for them where it's 5-on-5 with that type of situation where everybody's always touching the ball? The ball's not being hit to right field and all the infielders are running to the outfield. And you got 9 players in center field looking for the ball. It's just, that's the first thing I would change. The second thing I would change is at the younger levels, and I know this is never going to happen, but if somebody was really serious about developing players, Where they have pitch ball, I would only allow fastballs. I would not allow any other pitch, period. Why? We know the benefits, the fundamentals, the arm injuries, the board being bored where a young person struggles throwing strikes because they've got 90 pitches. We know all this. So that's the other thing that I would change. But I would also make sure that our coaches are extremely educated in the fundamentals. Like you said, first thing, the fundamentals. After that, we can get into game strategy. Obviously kids have to know positions. There's ways to do that and to teach the coaches, but they have to do it in a fun manner when they're doing all this, especially from your 5 to 11-year-olds or 10-year-olds. Extremely important. And then worry about, the strategies as they get a little bit more competitive. Some of these kids have a pretty good idea. The American kids, they watch TV. They know where first base is. They know where to throw the ball at first base, man on first, throw the ball second, a double play. They have a pretty good idea. But fundamentally, I always said this in the clinics, and I'll stop. I always said it's great that you know strategy, but if my right fielder can't throw the ball at a cutoff guy and he can't catch it, strategy is worthless, right? Even in bunt situations, if you can't field the ball, what strategy are you going to do, right? So get the fundamentals down, and that's what the Japanese do. And then they worry about strategy, and then they worry about the number one thing that we fail, myself included, later on is creating real game situations the best we can to prepare them for games. Because that's where the part comes in where coaches say, well, we worked on base run, you're bunting, and now they can't bunt. Well, did you work on a real game situation, or did you just work on fundamentally? Fundamentals are one, but two, you got to put them under pressure. So that's where we're at. That's what I would do.
And I'm glad that you said it that way because yes, something that I mean, yeah, I struggle with it, but I think I'm getting better at it, is to create those game-like situations. It's so important. That's why I'm so glad that you mentioned it because, yes, you take them in the cage and you teach them how to bunt. Well, yeah, that's one thing. But get him on the field, put him in a situation, run around first. We're trying to move him over. Can you get that bunt down when a guy is, really trying to get you out as opposed to being in a cage and doing it? That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you might have coach pitching, but good speed, right? Or you could have, if a player hasn't pitched in a while, you could have the player doing that, right? A real pitcher, so you got a real game situation. The other thing is, I think, and look, I, I keep telling coaches this, I do not have all the answers. I mean, I'm looking at when I go to the ABC like you do, I'm like, wow, man, that wakes me up because you know why? It says, you know what? I really don't know the things I do know because there's a lot more to learn out there. And one of the things coaches struggle with, especially at the younger levels, is the ability to decide in my practices, what am I going to practice live game situation? If you're working on balls over the fence, an outfielder's catching balls over the fence, you're wasting your time because that means your pitching's that bad, that many balls are going over the fence, and that's the wrong thing to work on. But if you use your common sense and you're a youth league coach, you say, you know what, kids are getting to first base and they're stealing second all the time. Okay, so now are you focused? That means that happens a lot in the game, right? Well, that should be your focus, is one of the things that at the top of your list saying, I need to now work with the catchers, pitchers, first baseman, runners. We need to do this a lot in practice so we can hold the runners. So we don't have to necessarily throw them out all the time. Hold them, and you know what I'm talking about. Now we got that down because we know that happens a lot. What happens a lot? Pitcher throws to the catcher. Well, we're working a lot with pitchers and catchers. I mean, because that will create your defense will be much better because the less runners on base, all that stuff. So that's another thing coaches struggle with. What do I pick in practice to work on? And I think one of it is what happens in the game the most, and also and then later on worry about what some of your weaknesses are too.
Yeah, and I think that, what you just said, the things that happen the most in a game, that's why it's so important if you're a coach to keep a notepad in your back pocket. I mean, I use my lineup card. My lineup card is in my back pocket, but I have a pen with me. And if I see something during the game that we didn't execute right, well, I just take a little note so that now I know, to your point, this is something that happens in the game a lot and we're not doing it right. We got to work on it. It's really that simple. If you just if you just pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah, and I just heard a couple coaches talk about, when you're supposed to talk to your players, after a game, after practice, when they're doing things wrong. How do how do you approach that? And we all know, obviously, when you have a game and they've done a lot of things wrong, you've got your notes. It's probably a good idea to put on the brakes, they say, guys, go home, relax, and take a break, breathe, have some food, enjoy yourself at home. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk about some of the things that we're going to work on to improve, right? And then the times where it's really they've had a great game, and they won and things are fantastic, there you could throw a couple nuggets in there, said, you guys did awesome, right? You guys are fantastic today. But remember, we got to get better all the time, right? Because the better we are, then we got better chance for the playoffs and so forth. We're more consistent. Here are two things that maybe we need to work on a little bit more that we didn't do so well today. That could be done after practice. It can be done the next day. You have to choose. That's why you're the manager, right? You're the head coach. You got to decide. You got to look at their body language. You got to look at how they're reacting and make that decision when you're going to do that as a coach. And again, this is the old cliche. You've just got to be more positive than negative, because it can be a negative game. And that doesn't mean you don't sit there and tell them what things they need to improve on. And here's this: knock down your ego as a coach, because how many times have I sat there and gone, hey guys, that situation, man, on first and second, I called this. You know what? Probably the wrong thing to do at that time. I thought it was the good thing, but then I thought about it. I made a mistake. Okay. Now, when they see you're human, they feel better. Instead, we always want to feel, oh, I'm the manager, I'm the coach. I don't make mistakes. Yeah, you do. Don't be afraid to admit them, because you look at some of the greatest leaders, right? What do they stress? Even your corporate leaders. Don't be afraid to tell your employees in a meeting that, hey, this didn't work. This is on me. We're going to make this better, right?
Peter, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think that that is so important for coaches to understand. Number one, I believe that the game has no place for egos. Now, we all have egos, okay? But we can't let the ego control us, okay? So, I could not agree with you more that yes, it's so important to let your players know that we're human too, that we make mistakes. Hey, I remember just something just popped in my head last year where runner was coming from second to third, and I didn't hold him up quick enough. And he got kind of down the line, and he did make it back to third base. And the first thing I did is I walked over and I said, "That's on me, bud." I said, "That's on me. I should have held you up sooner. I didn't, so don't worry about it. Let's go." You have to do that.
Absolutely. Your players will respect you a lot more if you do. And then another aspect of it is it's interesting, I get a lot of going to Europe and working with European players a lot of times in tournaments, or I when I'm doing my lineup, I'll sit with my players, and I'll ask them questions. I'll ask individually, where do you feel more? Doesn't mean I'm still going to make probably the final decision, but I'm going to ask him where you feel more comfortable, because mentally, if he feels more comfortable at that position, and then it makes sense for me, strategically to put him in that position. I just learned something, right? And I can make the lineup a lot better instead of figuring that myself and my coaching staff know it all. Include the players in that, and then you're gonna tell them I'm still gonna make the final decision, but I really would like your input. And it doesn't have to be publicly; it could be also through social technology. They can send in the lineup they think is the best. I've done that where
Yeah.
I ask them all send me the lineup you think is the best lineup for our team, right? I get 12, 15 different lineups, and they look at them, right? And match them up. And it's kind of interesting to see those things. I just think that's part of coaching.
Yeah. And the other thing that you said that I wanted to touch on, and I'm kind of backtracking a little bit, is
That's all right.
those end of the game conversations with your team. I want coaches to understand that when you lose, even if you got spanked, okay, that conversation with your team should be shorter than in a game where you won. Okay. In a game where you win, okay, it should be, hey, proud of you. You pitched a great game. Hey, buddy, I love the way you moved those runners over and da 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 da, and praise them and build them up. When they didn't play well, to your point, let them go home, let them relax, let them decompress, and we'll talk about it later.
Absolutely. Hey, it's interesting too, and I'm going to go back and say, okay, I've been doing it for 20 years, but it's true, probably more. And then I'm starting to see it now more at the high school level in the last 5 years, I believe. What I've always done is I've always included the parents in all our meetings for two reasons. One, because whether you like it or not, dad and mom have more control of their son or daughter because they're going to be with them more time. So whatever you say, they may say something different because they believe something different. But if they hear you talk to the team say after a game or after practice, whatever it is, I have an open thing that we do. We say, come on out, you can listen. One, they get an idea of what your philosophy is and what you're trying to teach and so forth. But really, we're not talking to the kids, to the players. We're really talking to the parents. You're educating the parents through the kids. So you just happen to be talking to the kids at the same time. Because the kids already heard it, right? In your practice and your games and stuff strategically, but you're educating parents. And in my opinion, this has worked for us. Now, the more educated the parents are, the less issues you're going to have. The
Yes.
more you keep them away, the more issues you're going to have. So now you're always going to have somebody that doesn't agree with you, and that's fine. That's part of life. You just deal with that and you work with it. If it's ever a major problem, you can, you talk to the parents about it. But you want their support, and the way to get it is to show them that you got a lot of confidence in what you're doing, and you got a lot of control of the situation, and you can help everybody in general, and we're all on the same page now. So welcome them to the practice talk or to the after game talk.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's very important to, have those parent meetings. At the high school level, I can't kind of do that. I wish I could because I would love to do it
Right.
because I think it's a great thing. But I can tell you that even like with my podcast and certain things that I've put out on social media has helped me in the way that you just talked about because people now know. They hear me. They know what my philosophy is. They know where I'm coming from and it makes it so much smoother. So, coaches, I would say out there that yeah, the more you can involve the parents and the more you can let them understand what you're about, the better off you're going to be.
Here's the other thing. Think about this, everybody. If you're a coach, if you're a parent coaching, if you're a high school coach, doesn't matter. What I've done is this, and again, I'm just trying to give you the successful stuff that's worked for me. I've had everybody on WhatsApp, right, on one group, and parents, players, whatever. You could have two groups at a time, whatever you want to do. But I put them all on one. And what am I doing? I'm always sending messages. Sometimes individual to a player for whatever reason. Hey Joe, hang in there. I've had tough days. You're gonna have tough days. It'll get better. We'll work together on it. It might be a small message. Could be to a parent, or it could be to the group. The other thing is, I know parents aren't going to want to hear this, but again, we do it full time, so we should be better at it. They're going to hear things that they're going to go, darn, I didn't know that. Boy, I better listen to coach. Instead of trying to figure out how to go around them and tell my kid, do this instead of that. This guy or gal knows what they're talking about. So that's the other part is you're trying to show them that you've got some knowledge here and you can really help their kids. You just got to be patient, follow along, and then help because if you can if you can kind of tell the kids at home the same thing the coach is telling them, that just reinforces things, right? Makes the player better.
Yeah, I was just talking to a couple of coaches about that exact thing because I was how do I put it? I don't want to say I was against it, but I didn't communicate with my high school parents as much as I probably should. And it was basically just a meeting in the beginning when the season started, gave them my expectations, and then I kind of left it alone. Well, I was talking to two coaches. One was from Ohio, and the other was actually from here in upstate New York. And they said what they do is they send a weekly email, and the parents are included on it, which shocked me because I never, looked at it that way. But after I
Sure.
thought about it, I said, might not be such a bad idea. This way the parents are informed. Again, like we were just saying, they know where you're coming from, and it'll probably make your life a little bit easier.
Yeah, and you know what? And it can help with situations too. I'll give you a quick example. I'm in the Dominican Republic. I've got an American team. We're playing in a tournament. There's a man, I can't remember, man on, I think it was man on first. And you're going to kick out of this. Man on first, they get a base hit. It's first and third. The guy on first missed third, right? So, we didn't ever practice this team, right? It was just, we just arrived Dominican. We're playing in a tournament. So I didn't know the players that well. So, I called time. I told them, throw the ball to third base, tag the runner, tell him you missed second base, right? So my pitcher does that. He throws the ball. The only problem is he throws it in the left field, right? So the run scores and all that. But you can imagine what the parents are thinking. Not only bad throw, okay, that's one thing, it happens. But who's the idiot that told him to throw to third base, right? The coach in the stands. Well, we all know that you can do that, and that's the best way to defense runners from taking, because if I throw to second, tag the base, the runner on third, my runner, if I've taught him well, he's going to take off for home because nobody's going to throw the ball at home because they think there's, you can't do that.
Right.
You got to wait for the appeal, and you don't because time's back in. So if I score a run and they call them safe, that's a run. If they call them out, it's a third out. It's a third out anyway. So what did I do? I didn't have time for a parent meeting, so I sent it in WhatsApp. Right? That kept everybody quiet. And it happened, believe it or not, at the World Baseball Classic, China against Cuba. I'm sitting with Charlie Rutherford, who's the Major League Baseball supervisor. And I'm the WBSC technical committee person. And it happens, and I turned to Charlie. I said, Charlie, why what happened was the Chinese Taipei was actually first base. They appealed first base because he missed the base, they said. They threw to first, and the guy from second went to third, right? And called the runner for safe at first. So I go to Charlie, how come they didn't just throw the ball where the runner's at and tag them? You know what Charlie's answer was? He goes, hey, Pete, I've been umpiring for 35, 50, 40 years, whatever it is. I've been wondering the same thing. Now, why didn't we do that? I was taught that early on at Make Your Own Baseball School, at umpire school. So I knew that early on. But why don't we do it? Because we're normally going to do what we've been taught all the time. And we're not thinking outside the box, thinking, is there a better way to do this? That's the part that I think I encourage coaches always to think about. Whatever you're doing, is there a better way to do it? If there's a better way, find that way and do it.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, you just taught me something.
I don't know if I answered your question or not, but
Well, like, like, like I said, I mean, it doesn't matter because that was good information. Because again, you just taught me something. I don't know if I would have appealed to play that way. I would have probably
no,
appealed
and,
it.
and that was Charlie's point, right, Jimmy? Charlie's point was he's never seen it at the major league level, minor league level, and in 35 years they've been doing it. Because a lot of times, and you see the game now, it's starting to change, right? Because we got some younger minds being a little bit more constructive. I mean, they're challenging things a little bit more and asking, is there a better way? So we're seeing newer ways now because, and that started out with Moneyball, right? When Moneyball first came out,
Yeah.
everybody was critical in some ways, but then they started realizing, yeah, there are better ways to do it. And we're always getting stuck in the old way. And baseball was a traditional sport, right? We always did it the same way all the time. That's the way I was taught. That's the way I did it. So we started to think a little bit more, can we do it better? And that's when things started to become more creative.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. But this is all very, very good stuff. So talk to me. What's coming up for Peter Caliendo? Where are we going? What are we doing? What's coming up for
Yeah,
you?
like anything else, I don't know about you, but I had to get rejuvenated because for the last couple of years I had moved to South Carolina, so it's not I'm not involved in baseball in this area. I'm still involved in baseball around the world internationally, and I love obviously teaching coaches around the world. And I'm starting. I need a little bit of a kickback, and I told you this. I need a little bit more juice. The ABC kind of juiced me up a little bit, right? Got me going. So I'm continuing to obviously have teams that travel to Italy, Dominican Republic, Cuba, um, uh, Japan, and what we do is Caliendo Sports International recruits the players and coaches that would like to have that experience as a cultural sports experience. I tell people all the time, you can do it one time, folks. Take a trip with us internationally. It will change your life, not only culturally, but also baseball wise. And if you can do the family, that's fantastic. If you can't, you do one parent and one. Oh, it's an 8, 9 day trip. And we go to a lot of, these places that I mentioned, and there's games every day and competition, and there's touring and all that. And then on the flip side, ISG Baseball, we've been doing it for 40 years. We have our coaching seminars around the world. We're a nonprofit organization. I encourage people, again, coaches that want to be involved in that, to let me know. It's a weekend seminar that we host in 16 different countries, and different coaching staffs go. And it's a lot of fun, and it's helped grow the game, again, worldwide. We are looking for sponsors in case somebody's out there that wants to promote their product or service around the world. We've got a sponsorship program. We're not for profit, 501c3. So those are a couple of things that I'm working on right now that are important. And then, like anything else, may kick off my podcast after a 2 year break. That's something I want to talk to you about after the show because you know this really well, not only from the technology standpoint, but from the podcast part. So that might be something because the reason I do the podcast, I think is the same reason you do it, and that is one, to educate myself. So it's a little selfish, right? Because every time you got a speaker on, you're learning. It's one way to learn, another way to learn, right? Ask the questions
Yes.
you want to ask. But then at the same time, realistically, another platform, a different platform to allow coaches and parents to come on and listen because you can learn from everybody. And it's fun. I enjoy it. So I want to try to get back into that.
Well, I got to tell you, number one, you just humbled the crap out of me because you were one of the first guys, and I'm not blowing smoke, okay? When I first started listening to podcasts, I listened to Peter Caliendo, okay? And for you to say that you need to talk to me because of what I've done with my podcast, Peter, that just humbled me beyond belief because I look at you like a mentor in this whole podcast world. And, I can't thank you for saying that. That just meant a lot to me.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate it. We're good friends. I don't say just because we're really good friends. I really enjoy talking to you. It's a fact, so when facts come out, you got to let people know about it. And that's, on the flip side, that's what coaching's all about, right? Being realistic and being fair and honest, with your players and parents and that's what we're doing here. We're being honest of our opinions. And if I didn't think that was true, then, I would be on the podcast with you, and then I wouldn't have to follow up with anything else, right?
right. Well, it's almost a situation where it's like the coach is asking the player for advice, and to me that means a lot.
Hey, and you know what, Jimmy? Think about that, what you just said. Um, Again, I'm going on experience all over the world, all these countries. I want to give it my experience out as best I can. How, how many times have I learned something by asking a player? I don't care if it was a player in Czech Republic, Japan, Cuba, ask them a question what they thought about that or how would they do it different, a player, and you'd be surprised the answers you get and things you learn from them. Simple, right? And that's
Yeah,
exactly what you're talking about. You can learn from anybody.
yeah, yeah. I had a situation years ago, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was play at first base, and we were working on something, and one of my players said, "Hey, coach, my such and such coach does it this way." And again, not being a hard-headed person, I said, "Show me." So he did. He said this. I said, "You know what?" I said, "We'll talk about this tomorrow." I wanted to think about it. I went home. I came back. I said, "I love that. Let's do it."
That's a good thing because think about it. Um, you said, how does your coach do it? Right? And that player's going to tell you. And get this, I remember sitting with my wife. She doesn't know much about baseball, and sitting with my wife watching a Cub game. She'll go, "Hey, how come they did that? Why didn't they do it this way?" And then I'm taking my glasses off, thinking, "Why didn't I think about that?" Because she had an outside perspective, right? Not knowing the game, you're going to ask more questions. And then sometimes you come up, why don't they do it this way? Why do you do it that way? Right? And it's amazing. I mean, and I learned from somebody that doesn't know the game because of
Yeah,
that, because of what, the questions she asked.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing. And again, it's like we said before, in terms of education, especially for coaches, you have to be open. You have to be willing to listen. Otherwise, again, if that ego creeps in and you're like, well, this is my wife. What does she know about baseball? I'm not going to listen to her. Well, you just missed an opportunity where you might have been able to learn something.
Yeah, knowing your own skills is important. In other words, what you're good at, what you're not. Example, I'm not good at writing. I know that, right? Either somebody told me or I figured it out. What am I good at? Well, my better skill is listening. I learned that from somebody, whether it be my parents, my mentors. I didn't realize I was good at it, but that's something I'm good at. So I have my weaknesses, my strengths. I think as coaches, we need to understand what those are and like anything else, maybe, take your weaknesses and try to make them a little bit better, and that'll make you a better coach overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's again like what I tell my players all the time is we want to try and work on strengthening our weaknesses rather than trying to
Yep.
strengthen our strengths.
Coaches, same thing.
Yeah, same exact thing.
Agreed.
Well, I'm excited that you're going to be speaking up in Massachusetts, and I think that that the people up in Massachusetts are lucky to have you to be able to go there, and I'm going to try and get there if I can.
Be great to see you, but I know it's not easy schedule wise. I appreciate that.
Yeah, this time of year, for us is we're just starting to ramp everything up and try and get
Yep.
these kids ready. So, but I will definitely, and I think that that's fantastic. But Peter, as always, I mean, it's always a pleasure talking with you, and I appreciate you coming on and spending time with me.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, man. Jimmy, I loved it. Let's do it another time, but I know you got a lot of guys lined up, so it's always good to do it later in the future. But looking forward to it, looking forward to talking to you, obviously, off the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks, Peter, and as usual, we'll stay in touch.
All right, take care, man. Bye, everybody.